Welcome to ReBrand and this last episode of Season 2.
Season 2 is done already?
It's true. It's been a shorter number of episodes, but, I think per minute, I think we've probably hit the same mark. We had some long episodes this season. We took a hard turn doing some more content-driven stuff. I think I'd like to say that we became thought leaders for the United Methodist Church.
Of course.
And we've been pretty excited about that. But this is the end of an era. This is the end of a season of UMC. We are excited. It's been a month post-General Conference.
Yep.
And I'll be honest, we didn't quite follow through on all we said we were going to do for the podcast for General Conference. It was my first General Conference.
It was my first full, yeah.
First full. It was a grind.
Yeah. I had no idea just how much time we would be spending either. If we weren't at the conference participating, then we were editing video, doing writing, doing social, and it was a 7 a.m. to midnight or 1 a.m. every day.
The way the process that takes place during General Conference, you have to be tuned in just enough the entire time. Otherwise, you never know what's happening.
That's exactly right.
Because there's a conversation, there's a motion on a comment on the motion on the amendment to the petition to the point of order to the and if you tune out for a minute, you don't know what the current motion is on the floor, and so the entire time the plenary's in session, you have to be paying attention. And then once plenary's over at 6 o'clock, then you get to start working.
Exactly, and there's still the whole process time. Just being able to process not only what has gone on from a legislative standpoint, but your own personal emotions. Yeah,
no kidding.
It's like, good grief. And,
we're still doing that work,
and that's what we're talking about today.
Yeah. Well, that's true, and we did plenty of content while we were there on ReBrand socials. So if you're just a podcast listener and you think we didn't do anything for the last 6 weeks. Or 4 weeks, whatever, you're missing out, because we did put a bunch of stuff up on social. We just didn't do full episodes. So you should go follow us, rebrand_pod on Instagram, search for ReBrand Podcast on Facebook and on YouTube. And you can find our website at rebrandpodcast.com, or you can email us at rebrand@holston.org.
Wow.
It only took me 2 seasons.
I tell you, but that was flawless.
It was.
We didn't even have to cut there.
Yeah, that's true.
Way to
and
go.
This was the people don't know about this.
Uh-oh.
I started putting ReBrand content on TikTok.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just my name. So if you search for Ben Smith, you can find ReBrand content on TikTok. We're TikTokers.
We're half TikTokers.
That's
I still haven't bought into TikTok yet. I'm a Reels guy, not necessarily a TikTok guy. Sure.
And I feel old on TikTok. I just do.
Really?
I mean, I'm outside the outside the demographic.
Well, that makes me.
I'll tell you. It's not a surprise to me, but all of our Reels content, you can call them Reels, you can call them TikToks, you can call them Shorts.
Yep.
They consistently perform best on YouTube as YouTube Shorts.
Really?
So if you look at YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, Facebook Reels, and TikToks, if I put the same content, the same piece across all 4 of those, they consistently do dramatically better on YouTube.
Wow.
So that speaks to the demographic that's in the UMC. Really, I think if you look at the age breakdowns. Which YouTube gives me the most metrics for audience. We're looking like most of our audience, almost, I think it's like 75% is 35 and up.
Okay.
And over 50% was like 55 and up. So, talk about a young people problem. Well, it's not a young people problem. It's a church problem reaching young people.
That is one way to look at it, and I think there's a lot of truth there. The other part that we need to look at is it looks like my people, my demographic
Mm-hmm.
is really the ones that are paying attention to this. It sounds like you need to step up your game to reach your demographic.
You're right. That's true. Yeah. You have more fans than I do. Is that what you're saying?
Well, that we've known that from day one.
Yeah.
But anyway.
All right, we're off track.
Hey, that is a good segue to what we're thinking about for season 3.
Oh,
right?
Tell the people.
We are looking at season 3 to launch into some more social media things to help people understand social media, the analytics, the algorithms, what to post, what not to post.
How to use artificial intelligence.
How to use free software like Canva to do some graphics and be able to create something that people are going to watch, people going to read.
Content calendar, sustainability on social media.
So that'll be our next season. That's what we're looking at doing, which we'll talk a little bit more about that later. That'll come after annual conference. While we wrap up season 2 here, we will have a special that's coming through with annual conference like we did last year with our recaps. We've got something else to talk about at the end of this podcast. So we'll have a little brief segment that we're going to do, and then we'll launch into season 3. So as always, we want to say thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Thanks for reaching out. We really appreciate that. Love the comments that some of you make. Some of the other comments,
Yeah. We got some trollers on social during General Conference.
We did quite a bit.
Yeah.
And at first it's easy to take those things as a personal attack.
Yeah.
But then as we began to set back and just smile, because the trollers really make the algorithm jump, man.
Honestly.
I mean, absolutely. They just keep bringing in numbers and views and shares for us. And hey, bring them on.
Thanks for that.
Thanks for the boost.
Thanks for that. All right, well, let's, for the rest of this episode, we're going to recap some of the discipline change that happened or will happen in the latest round of the Book of Discipline.
Mm-hmm.
And then some of our personal takeaways from General Conference, both in tangible outcomes, but also just it being both of our first full General Conference.
Yep.
What surprised us, what we... the things that I think for me, the things that will stick with me about the conference and about the way our global UMC really works. So we'll do that and then talk about kind of this whole season has been about how do we move forward as a denomination? What does a healthy future look like for the UMC? And so we'll close today by talking about post-General Conference.
Yep.
All the stuff we've been talking about this season, is that still true? Is that still the direction we need to be moving? How has that been affected by the outcomes of General Conference, or what does a healthy future look like for the UMC?
Yep.
So let's dive into some of the discipline change. A lot of the conversation leading into General Conference and while we were there was about the 3 R's.
Yep.
And so I want to do the 3 R's, but then I might also add the 3 R's plus 1 and do the budget reduction, because I think that's an important conversation to talk about. Yep. So the 3 R's, the first one, revised social principles.
Mm-hmm.
So we've talked a lot about that. We put out a full conversation with John Hill, who's the outgoing interim general secretary for Church and Society, which is the general board of the UMC, which is charged with implementing and educating on the social principles for our denomination. They're also the body which facilitated the process of revising our social principles. Right. So going into this General Conference, we spent 10 years completely from the ground up rewriting the social principles.
Yeah.
So I had a conversation with John Hill all about the new social principles, Church and Society, and all of that. You should go check that out.
You really need to. That I think was one of the best interviews that we've done on ReBrand. He is just a phenomenal guy.
Yeah.
And I didn't know him.
Yeah.
I got to meet him at General Conference after your interview and after you talking about it.
Yep.
Man, the UMC is going to miss him in his retirement.
John is stepping back as the interim general secretary, but he's also stepping off of staff for Church and Society, for which he's been a part of for 12, 14, 16,
it's been a while.
16 years, double-digit years.
Yeah.
He has been a fantastic leader and servant in the UMC. And also he's really fun. I got to spend a week with him in Dubai last year.
Yep.
And then spent some time with him and the Church and Society team at General Conference. He's a good dude. Check out that interview.
Yeah, all that to say, be sure to go on rebrandpodcast.com and you can find that interview or on our YouTube channel and check it out. Just great stuff.
Yep. But the revised social principles passed at General Conference almost completely as the petitions were submitted. There was one edit in language in the language about marriage and to allow for two different ideas of marriage, one being between a man and a woman. So it reads marriage being between a man and a woman or between two consenting adults.
Correct.
And so I think that's fine. That a lot of people talked about how that was an example of the big tent that the UMC is trying to be.
Exactly.
That there is space for differing opinions, that it's not some liberal agenda, liberal progressives trying to push out the conservatives, trying to override the Africans, but that it is an attempt denomination-wide to make space for a diverse opinion.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And the other thing about all of this, the revised social principles, not only was it 10 years in the making, but they had contributions from over 4,000 people writing into this, and they took the parts from all voices and put it together, and then it went through the legislative committees. All of those passed. Not unanimously, nothing passes unanimously, but
with overwhelming support.
Overwhelming, over 80% on almost all of them. And then when it got to the floor, the same thing. I mean, it was just most of these things, like you said. I don't know if you said it on this one, but passed on the consent calendar.
Yeah. I think that was one of the defining traits or characteristics of our time in General Conference. Was there were very few close votes on the in plenary at least, and as far as I can remember, really the only ones that were close, there were no clear lines drawn politically speaking. It wasn't really conservative versus liberal.
No,
it was just a difference of opinion on specific language for an amendment or
that's where the
specific instance. It wasn't, I disagree with the idea, the spirit of this petition, or I agree with it. It was just, I think this would be a helpful piece of language. Or
nuanced languages.
Yeah.
That was the closer votes. But even in those, it was upper 60s to lower 30s. Yeah. I do remember something being in that low 60s, or I'm sorry, high 50s, low 40s. Yeah. But I don't remember exactly what that was.
Yeah, and I don't think it was something of significant consequence.
No, it seems to me like it was something to do with rules and how we, like it was early on.
Like a suspension of the rules vote or something.
About instead of taking 3 speeches for, 3 speeches against, let's move it to 2 and 2. And people weren't necessarily against that. They were just saying it might be a little too early to do that.
I think that's true. Yeah. Yeah. So the revised social principles have passed and will technically aren't in effect yet until January 1, unless any petition, unless specifically stated, doesn't go into effect until the start of the following year.
Correct.
And so the revised,
other than constitutional changes, which we'll talk about that in just a moment.
So the revised social principles fall into that category. And so we have between now and January to familiarize ourselves with the revised social principles so that we can start living into them.
Yep.
I mean, even ahead of January, but starting in January. To that end, in Holston, in our conference, we have had a church and society ministry area as a part of our nominations, one of our entities for which to be nominated. However, traditionally that's just been a single person.
Right.
And oftentimes that is a member of Holston who's on the general board.
Yeah.
We are now expanding that ministry area to have a whole group of people. I think there are 12 individuals now that will be a part of our Holston Church and Society ministry area, tasked with this responsibility of educating and resourcing our local churches to live into these new revised social principles.
And, I think another good portion of that is this group will help educate the churches just what's going on in society. A lot of times in our news, we know that big things are what captures our attention. But a lot of times the church can do their best work, our best work, in some of the smaller things, and we don't necessarily know what's going on. And so are we calling, is it Church and Society for Holston? Is that what we're calling?
Correct.
So our Church and Society group can help us stay informed with some of these pieces and let us know what we can do to expand our ministries and to be a part of our connectional system.
Yep. Some of our churches, local churches here in Holston, have specifically named groups at their church level called Church and Society. Others have a large part of that is social justice. That's not all of Church and Society, but that's a large part of it. And so churches may have social justice groups, or they may just have Sunday school groups or life groups, which are especially interested in creation care, climate change activism, social justice, women's rights, LGBTQ rights, all kinds. I mean, all peace with justice. All of this stuff is part of the realm of Church and Society. And so this group now at our annual conference level will help bridge the gap between the general board at the denominational level and then down to the local church level. So I'm excited. I get to be a part of that.
Yeah, I was about to say,
part of that group.
As people learn more about this, and especially our ReBrand listeners and viewers, if they want to know more about it, who can they contact?
Yeah, I will be a part of that ministry area. And so, we are really excited about that. So we have the committee filled. That is done by the nominations process. Though, if this is something you're especially interested in, I'm sure that we would allow you to come to our meetings. We're not going to say no. Technically, you would be a non-voting present member. However, I'm not sure how much voting is going to be done in this group. So,
well, it's fairly new. I mean, it's been around, but like you said, it's been kind of a chairperson that has been more of a liaison.
Absolutely.
What's going on in the general church, and kind of come back and let other ministry areas know, connectional ministries area know, and now we can take that and disseminate that information and make it more Holston centric. So I think that'll be really cool.
I'm excited about that. Our next R is regionalization.
Regionalization, the easiest word in the world to say.
Yeah, but we heard it a lot.
Yes, we did.
Conference.
Yes, we did.
This is also the only one which has constitutional implications.
That's correct.
And that means that it will have to go to all of our annual conferences and central conferences for ratification before it actually is approved and goes into effect.
That's correct.
Talk us through what that process will look like.
So it's an aggregate vote. So all of the delegate members or members of the annual conference will be meeting at their annual conferences. Some will do this and central conference. And some will do this year. As a matter of fact, most of our central conferences will probably vote on it this year because they don't typically meet until the fall, October, November timeframe. For the annual conferences in the U.S., most will be voting on that in 2025, and some of that is because they're still working on the exact language to be able to put out to annual conferences. But even if they were to get that out today, most of our annual conferences are going to want to wait so they can process that, so they can talk about it throughout the year and then vote on it at their 2025 annual conference. And then we will find out the results of that aggregate vote probably the fall, late fall 2025. And then if that passes, then, and again, it's an aggregate vote, so it's not like our electoral college where whatever happens in at Holston annual conference, if it passes, we get a vote of one. It is the total number of lay, total number of clergy votes put together throughout the worldwide denomination.
Read popular vote, not electoral college
Exactly. And so if that passes, then that is going to allow the U.S. to set up a regional really book of discipline, where we are able to take portions of the book of discipline and make them regionally centric. The central conferences have had a lot of that ability to do so, but it hasn't been for the United States. And where it really comes into play, a lot of people have kind of linked this back to human sexuality specifically, and while that could have been a part of this, it goes well beyond. And we really, from my standpoint, again, this being my first full general conference, I understood very quickly the need for regionalization, because there were moments when we would spend hours on just something that affected the U.S. and hours on something that just affected our African conferences. And it was like, golly, if we were able to have these areas, General Conference could be sped up tremendously. And I really think, and this is going to be a big one as we talk about budgets, it's going to save us money. Because General Conference may not have to be as long if we're able to take care of some of these regional aspects in a different form or fashion.
That would be nice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so we spent a mind-numbing amount of time at General Conference talking about pensions.
Yes.
Right? I think that is the biggest, really the most consequential, I think, potential change related to regionalization is that the way that we handle pensions, pension liability, retirement accounts, all of that stuff through WestPath, which is our the board, the general board of or general agency of the UMC, which deals with all of that. That they almost exclusively work with our U.S. Clergy, and U.S. church employees, However, we spend so much time at General Conference talking about that stuff. And so all of our Central Conference delegates, which at this conference were somewhere like 40 to 45%, at the next conference, maybe more than 50%.
Sure.
Likely, I mean, we are trending in that direction.
Yeah.
So half of the room they're talking about something that doesn't affect them, that doesn't, I mean, I don't know if I want to say it's a waste of their time, but it's certainly not the most efficient use of their time.
It's not. And then also, they still have to vote.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess they could abstain from the vote, but their vote counts. One, they may or may not understand it because it's not something that's practical for them that they're utilizing. And it just becomes one of those things like, golly, why does this have to happen?
Yep. Definitely. I look at it kind of in this, like, in the U.S., right, we have this idea of states' rights, right? Like, those matters which are not federal purview are to be decided by the state. And so it's a similar situation, right? Like the context in which Tennessee is facilitating their society, right? Is different than Nebraska or Alaska or California, right? And so states are able to function differently, though they still have a large unifying structure and set of beliefs in the federal government system, right? And so, in the same way, our newly formed U.S. regional conference will be able to function separately in the same way that our central conferences across Africa, Europe, and the Philippines have been able to function.
Yeah.
And it truly is better for everyone.
I really believe that. And again, I can't tell you how many times I heard other people saying at breaks, well, if this doesn't tell us we need regionalization, then I don't know whatever will.
Yeah.
Because of just the laborious amount of time that was spent on a certain area versus something that affects the worldwide denomination.
Yep.
So we will be getting more information out to you through Holston Communications as it becomes available. And if and when you have questions, be sure to reach out. I'm sure we'll have something on holston.org where it will be centralized, where you can go in and find information. And again, send in your questions about that as well, so we can create a frequently asked question to help all of us.
Yep. And in Holston, our delegation will be giving a report at annual conference and talking all about it, and there will be plenty of information coming out between now and our 2025 annual conference.
Yep.
So. All right, the next one is maybe the big one, certainly the one that has that has gotten the most press attention. Our next R is the removal of language.
Yeah, absolutely. The removal happened. And we'll talk about this a little bit later on, but because it happened in a consent calendar, people were looking around at each other, asking that did that just happen? Because no one anticipated that. And again, we'll dive into this a little bit more. The process, the shock, the surprise, but it was definitely the big thing. You saw a pause within the communications room, which the communications room was filled with videographers, photographers, journalists, directors of communications from all across the worldwide denomination.
Yeah.
And so things started passing. We started looking around, and then you started seeing people scrambling because their phones began to ring. The text messages came. News services started getting a hold of us. I think that I talked to every major news outlet, TV outlet at least, in East Tennessee. And I talked to most in Southwest Virginia while I was at General Conference. And it was just something that happened so quick and kind of out of the blue for us.
Yeah. So where exactly does where is the UMC now on the topic of human sexuality? What is allowed, what is not allowed, what is protected, what is not protected? That's the conversation, and there is some conflicting information being spread. I mean, I think there's some misinformation really about what this will look like in practice.
Sure.
So, the thing that we hear is like, oh, well, now my church is going to get a gay pastor. And there is language now in the discipline that says that in the installment of pastors, in the placement of pastors, sexuality cannot be a determinant for not sending someone to a church.
Yeah.
So the cabinet cannot say, this person's gay, we're not going to send them to this church.
Right.
What does that look like in practice?
I'm not on the appointment cabinet, but I am part of the extended cabinet,
Yeah.
and I can tell you the conversations that have been taking place, and I am feel very confident that I can say our churches need to rest assured that our appointment cabinet, our bishop, is not going to send any pastors or connect any churches. They'll do their best to not set a ministry up for failure. Whether that is a church is wanting a person of LGBTQ or they're not, the cabinet has to take into consideration how the church is going to react to a pastor, as well as how a pastor is going to react to a church. And so while our appointment system says churches will accept the pastor that is sent, and our pastors are told where they will go, and there's a covenant process in there, it is extremely important that the appointment cabinet is not making appointments that's going to destroy churches and pastors.
Yeah.
We have to take that into consideration. Now, we also have to make sure that we're doing the right thing and that we're not being discriminatory by all stretch of the imagination. But the role of the appointment cabinet is still to make sure our churches can function in a way to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world.
Yeah. And I would say even more generally, the mandate of the annual conference is to support and resource local church ministry.
Yeah.
And I mean, what an integral part of that mandate is putting the right people in the right places.
Exactly.
We have a diverse group of pastors.
Mm-hmm.
We have a diverse group of churches. The role of the appointment cabinet is to faithfully listen to the direction of God in their appointment process to put the right people in the right places.
Yeah.
That's not going to change.
Right.
So.
And it's really easy to get caught up in fear-based rhetoric.
Mm-hmm.
And just because I thought Bishop said this beautifully, just because there are changes that are being made in our book of discipline around human sexuality, it doesn't mean that everyone is on the same page now and that everyone's going to believe the same way. We all have our culture and tradition and our beliefs, and we all hold pretty strong and pretty true to them. The beauty about the United Methodist Church is the open hearts, open minds, open doors. And what makes this work is when we can continue to serve together, even within our differences.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard a story yesterday that really just meant the world to me. And it was about a church member talking to a pastor saying, I don't know that we're going to be able to stay at the church due to what has taken place here. And the pastor was listening. By taking place here, I mean within the denomination, with the language changing.
Sure.
The pastor was listening and just allowing the person to talk and get things off of their chest. And at one point during the conversation, the pastor said, the congregant said, and here's the crazy thing. I was talking to my wife, and I said to my wife, does it bother you if our church has same-sex marriages? And this person's wife said, no, it it really doesn't bother me. It doesn't change the way that I feel toward my church. And this couple was married in the church many, many years ago and had been a part of the church and the ministry. And the pastor was so wise and asked the congregant at that point, he said, "So are you and your wife going to get a divorce?" and the guy, it just kind of shocked him. And he just got this smile on his face. And the moral of the story is these are two people that are in love with one another, that have shared life together. But there is a theological disagreement amongst them in their household. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean that they're separating from one another. And I know that is a simplification of maybe a bigger conversation, but it meant a lot to me to be reminded that within our denomination, we can think differently, but as long as we love and as long as we serve together, man, we can do so much for the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think, a lot of our audience are pastors, mm-hmm. right? We love our clergy audience. I think this is a challenging time to be a pastor. I can imagine it is a fearful time to be a pastor.
Absolutely.
There are very, very few churches, certainly in our conference, who are unified in their belief around human sexuality.
Yep.
Many of our churches are split down the middle.
Yeah.
And a majority of our churches may lean one way or the other, but certainly are not of like mind.
Sure.
And so the prospect of leading a church in this time, as this conversation around human sexuality in the Methodist Church, for years now, has been happening at a denominational level.
Yeah.
And so now we have gone the way of inclusion denominationally, or removed barriers, at least, to inclusion.
I'm glad. Yeah.
But now that's really, in practice, that has now shifted the conversation down to the local church.
Right.
So the denomination did not say, you shall have gay weddings in your church.
Right.
They said, there's no reason. We're not telling you can't. That's
Correct.
all. That's all.
Yep.
And so now it's up to the local churches and to pastors to decide if, for a church, your building will allow weddings, gay weddings in your church. For pastors, if you will officiate gay weddings. And so, I think that there is some, I imagine some internal conflict for a lot of our church leaders.
Uh-huh.
Your personal belief and your professional, the reality of the congregation that you're serving. Right. And so, I guess I might want to just, for whatever my opinion is worth, but give you some permission to, if you feel celebratory, to celebrate personally. If you feel that this is a direction that you don't agree with personally, you can grieve for our denomination personally. You can separate your personal beliefs and your personal emotions. You can process this personally. And I would say, actually, it is really important for you to do that.
Absolutely.
Because if you only look at these new events, these new decisions that have been made for our denomination from a professional perspective, then you will continue to have turmoil inside.
Absolutely.
And so, I know certainly for me as a conference staff person, I often have to separate my professional responsibilities from my personal beliefs, or at least maybe um, how much or to what degree I speak
Right.
into my personal beliefs. And I know that our pastors have to do that too.
Yeah.
And so I can empathize with the position that you are in, though I know oftentimes the stakes are higher for you at the local church. So find your people, find people that you can be open fully with and engage with this personally, so that you can, do that work, independent of what your church really
Absolutely
requires of you.
And I think this is a good segue to remind people what Bishop Wallace Paget has been talking about when it comes to passionate spiritual discipleship. And part of passionate spiritual discipleship is having accountability groups and covenant groups. And that accountability and covenant group can be your safe space to share what's going on in your heart, mind, soul, and walk along with your colleagues. And that's what helps us strengthen our discipleship. One of the things that helps us strengthen our discipleship is living in that community. And man, you have hit the nail on the head when you're talking about a pastor's relationship with personal belief versus how they their professional appearance, because within a congregation, especially within the United Methodist Church, we see people all over the theological spectrum, and political spectrum as well. But one thing that I hope that we can get to is to separate politics and theology, and move away from, well, this is a liberal agenda or progressive agenda or traditionalist agenda or conservative agenda, and just be okay that we interpret the Bible a little differently. And pastors really have to walk that line so that they're able to not only minister to the people in their congregation, but be able to be that pastor for the entire community. And so when you walk that line, sometimes you neglect yourself and you neglect what's going on internally. And so those covenant groups, I go back to that, those covenant groups are a great place to share that. And we also, quick prop to Kathy Hustis and the Center for Wellbeing, Holston Center for Wellbeing. I know that she would love to be able to spend time with our pastors that are struggling with the decisions that are being made and or with what's going on in their churches, and wants to be that resource to help our pastors in this tough, chaotic time.
Yeah. And I think I'll just kind of wrap this section by saying, if this decision around removal of language concerning human sexuality gives you cause for celebration, then celebrate. For me, this is a huge cause for celebration. Long time coming, and a lot of people have put a lot of work into moving into a place where we are even allowed to be inclusive in our denomination. And so celebrate that you in your context get to lean into inclusivity within the Methodist Church. It's okay to do that. I think there is this, at least for me, I have had these moments of fear, even though I am of sound, decided mind that this was a good direction for our denomination to go. I am still nervous for the future of our denomination.
Sure.
But I can do that and still celebrate this widening of the tent, so to speak, right? This welcoming in of people who have been excluded from our church for 40, 50 years.
Yeah.
So, do that. You celebrate. There's still work to be done, and there is still sorting out of the pieces, but pause, take a beat. Something big happened, And for many of us, it was something that's worth celebrating.
Yep.
All right, so that was our 3 R's. And now we have the +1, which is budget reduction, which
Boo.
I know, not a fun thing to talk about.
Nope, not a bit.
But a reality of church, a reality of the UMC, and not one that will be going away.
Right.
So, our budget, our what are we even calling this now? Our 2020 budget, our 2020,
our delayed.
It is both our 2020 and our 2024 quadrennial budget.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in practice, the budget that we will use from 2024 going through 2028,
yes,
was reduced by 38 to 41%. So, depending on apportionments, halfway through the quadrennium, it might drop to 41. It might, somewhere in the range of 40% reduction in our denominational budget. That is significant.
That's massive. Yeah.
What does that mean for our denomination? Where are those cuts coming from, generally speaking?
All over.
Yeah.
I mean, because the way the General Conference works, and people to understand our system of tithing and apportionments, local churches give. They pay into annual conferences as well as districts many times, and that helps support the district's ministry as well as the annual conference ministries as a whole. Annual conferences then also take the money that they receive and they pay into the general conference, and the general conference budget covers the worldwide denominational ministries. It covers our different agencies. And then it covers things like general conference, and it covers the administrative fees for certain things. It covers salaries. It within that is the Episcopal budget. So it's a huge budget to take a look at. And so when you make a cut of 40%, there's a lot of things that have to go.
Yeah.
And so just like the Holston conference, these committees, teams, boards, all of that got together and they cut as much as they can cut when it comes to ministry areas. And then they cut as much as they can cut when it comes to administrative areas. And then unfortunately, it comes to having to let people go.
Yeah.
And so our boards and agencies are struggling.
Yeah.
And we're seeing major cuts to personnel within those areas. And what that means is as personnel is cut, that means resources are going to be cut as well. And so now our general boards and agencies are trying to figure out what resources are being merged, are being cut back. What are we still going to be able to offer? What can't we offer? And so it's going to make a huge effect on all conferences, annual conferences, central conferences, all the way down to the local church level.
Mm-hmm. General Secretary Kumar, who presented the proposed budget, I think did a really good job of mourning the place that we are, that we need to make such drastic cuts, mourning the ministry that we will have to step back from, mourning the people who will have to be let go. But also, I think spoke a word of inspiration in this, whether we like it or not. This is going to force us to rethink the way that we do ministry, the way that we structure our denomination and our conferences and our general agencies to resource ministry happening. We cannot continue to do things the way that we've been doing them. Out of necessity, we need to restructure. We need to think about new practices, new structures, new ways of doing ministry. And there's some excitement, there's some possibility in that, though, our hand is being forced, right? Like that sucks. But, he said something to the extent of let's rise to the occasion.
Right.
Let's live into this new season. Which is tough, but it is a reality, and so let's do it. And I think that trickles down to the annual conference level. You know, like we gotta change the way we're doing stuff.
Absolutely.
The annual conference budget is necessitates cuts as well.
Yeah.
And I mean, we've taken some cuts.
Yeah, major cuts. I mean, we are overall, like our communications budget, we're looking at a total cut of 40 plus as well. When you look at over the last 2 years and the cuts that we've made there. But you're right. I mean, it does give us an opportunity to go in and look at things that we have done in the past that we probably should have stopped doing years ago, but we've continued doing it because it's tradition. It's the same thing within the local church. Our pastors, our laity that are a part of this podcast, they know there's things in their churches that they've done since 1970 that was a hit in 1970, but now in 2024, it really, the relevance isn't there. It's just something that they feel like they have to do because it's what the church has done all the time. Yeah. And so we have an opportunity to really begin to look at those things and decide what is some of the things that we can live without in order for us to be able to make the changes that we need to make, because we're always evolving, we're always adapting, we're always needing to look at new ways of doing things, new ways of doing ministry to reach new people, new generations. And if we stay stuck in our old ways, then this decline is going to happen at a more rapid pace than what we've been used to.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that goes across the board. We have never been good at taking away the things that aren't successful, right? Yeah. We are slow to change.
We hate to fail.
We are slow to admit that we have failed.
Yeah.
We're just fine at failing. We can we do that
quite a bit.
But for some reason maybe it's embarrassment, maybe it's whatever. We don't admit defeat, or we don't admit that we're not at our best. We try to cover it up, or we think some blind optimism is gonna make no. Well, like the way we even budget aside, right? The way we've been doing ministry has not been as effective as it used to be.
Sure.
There's a reason our budget, our budgets are declining because we haven't been doing ministry as effectively as we should be, could be.
Yeah.
And so, not only out of financial necessity, but also like we have a scriptural imperative to be doing the work of the kingdom, to be spreading the gospel, to be bringing people into relationship with Christ and with each other. And we aren't doing that as well as we could. And so, we need to change some stuff. And I think that means looking at everything that we're doing.
Absolutely.
Top to bottom. Which that's a process that we really did there was a lot of movement at the general conference level in re-envisioning the structure that we work with.
Yeah.
I mean, regionalization is a huge way, opens us up to be able to do a lot of that re-envisioning. That same intentionality needs to happen at the annual conference level, and it needs to happen at the local church level.
Yeah.
All of our structures, all of our committees, all of our budgets, all of our personnel. Are the committees that we were working with functioning the way they should?
Right.
Is our conference staff functioning the way that it should, to the degree that it should, as efficiently as we should? Is our budget being used to its fullest?
Yeah.
Are our dollars going to the places that are most effective? Do we have people who are engaged and dedicated and energetic enough to be doing ministry, to be leading in ministry right now. I believe that this is not the time for maintenance. This is not the time for status quo. This is the time to take risks, actually. I mean, like, we are dwindling into obsolescence right now.
Yes.
We have been, actually, for quite a while.
Well, it's, we've said this on this podcast many, many times, but back in the 60s and 70s is when the church growth movement really started to take hold of things. And if you look at numbers across full denominations and non-denominational churches, yes, you'll see areas where there was growth in certain places, like denominations started to shrink and non-denominations started to grow. But overall, Christianity numbers were falling. And so what we were doing was creating new buildings for places to meet, but we were, the term was recycling our Christians. We were having people that were already committed to churches leave their churches to go to another church. We were not discipling. And so the irony here is the church growth movement was really kind of the start of the great decline. Our numbers started declining much quicker within the church growth movement than any other time. And a lot of that is because we got away from discipleship. We've talked about that a lot, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time. But I'm so excited that we are putting things together in Holston to make a huge push and a huge focus on discipleship within Bishop Wallace Padgett's leadership. And projected appointment, can't ever say it's there until the gavel hits at annual conference, but the projected appointment is for the Reverend Kim Goddard, our superstar of the podcast.
That's right.
To come on as the A2B assistant to the bishop, and one of her main focuses is going to be on passionate spiritual discipleship and what that looks like, how that's defined, and how people can live into that. I'm not one that always likes to look at things in the past as being better than what we do going forward. But man, I really think if we would go back to early Methodism and look at the early Wesleyan theology of the way things were set up to focus on discipleship, I think that we could see a shift. And to have someone like Kim Goddard come in with her knowledge of Wesleyan history, Methodist history, tradition, and be able to help us move back toward some of those things like class meetings, maybe called something different, but something that focuses on living like and becoming more like Jesus, could truly transform our local churches, our conference, and then hopefully on into the jurisdiction and into the denomination as a whole.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what our whole season has been about.
Yeah,
right?
It has been.
We set out on this journey to rebrand the UMC.
Yep.
And we talked all about this need to move from survive to thrive, from tokenism to inclusion, from scarcity to abundance. All these different, I think in so many ways, like that work that we talked about all season, this need for change, this growth, the strategies I think we laid out through this season leading up to General Conference. I don't want to say like, yeah, we were right, but I mean, that's true. Like all those things are very much still true, very much still necessary. I do believe that what we've talked about all season is the way that our denomination needs to be moving if we are going to continue doing healthy ministry.
Absolutely.
So, with that, I think it's bittersweet to finish this season where we get to talk about such big overarching, culture changing kind of conversations for our denomination. But I know for me, I am personally moving into this space where, I had a mentor of mine I met with a few weeks ago who called me out a little bit saying, hey, you've been doing some really good kind of sounding the alarm.
Yeah.
You've been pretty vocal about the problems that you see and some of the solutions, although he said you could be more solution focused, but but he said, are you doing anything about it? Like,
Yeah.
are you actually like, rubber meets the road? Are you being a part of the change? Like, are you affecting any of this stuff that you talk about? And I was like, man, you're making me, you're really calling me out here. But it's like, I'm ready personally to get to work, I'm ready to stop talking about it and start doing it, to take some risks, to move from these big picture conversations into the detail. Like, I want to get in the weeds. I want to start doing this work. And that doesn't mean I'm going to stop calling out the problems that I see. But
Sure.
I think for me, the calling out of the problems are going to be much smaller stuff. I'm going to say, hey, if we want to change this thing right here, we need to, let's do it.
Yep.
Let's get to work.
Yeah.
And so, for me, I think the season of big picture conversation like this, certainly on the podcast, I'm ready to close that chapter.
Yeah.
Because I'm opening up a chapter where I'm going to start doing some work.
Yep.
So, here's you're my accountability partner. You're my accountability.
Yeah.
Call me out. As this, the mentor of mine called me out on not taking action enough, right? Like, we know what needs to happen. I think we do. As a denomination, as a conference, we have enough people who are sounding the alarm. We need more people that are going to go about doing the work.
And this goes back to our earlier conversation. If we're not doing it, the question becomes why. For many of us, I think the easy answer is, I just don't have time to take on something else. This is the season where you can change that. Because if you don't have time to fix the problems, and if you don't have time to live into that discipleship-based ministry that Jesus has called us into, that means you need to be getting rid of some things.
Yeah.
And so it's a good time to take a personal inventory, a ministry inventory, start cutting those things that are not helping address the problems, that are not being solutions, and get involved with the things like you're talking about. And as we've mentioned, our next season, we want to talk about some social media. I'm throwing this out. I'm processing out loud, and so Ben may beat me up for this afterwards. But one of the things that we could do next season is have a segment. If folks wanted to send us videos or testimonials, written statements, whatever, about what they're doing to address some of these big picture problems, because even though we're going to move away from entire episodes to be about this, we're still about the work of the church. We're still about the work of the ministry within the United Methodist Church. And so that we could highlight that. We could highlight your church, and then also maybe use that as a case study on what you could do social media wise to let other people in your community know what you're doing for that type of ministry.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that does it for this. I'm sure that does it for the season.
It does.
Season 2, that's a wrap.
So, if you've got more questions about General Conference, how can they get that information?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can contact us, right?
Yep.
ReBrand at holston.org. But you can also, the delegation's still there, so you can email delegation@holston.org. If you're going to be at annual conference in 2 weeks, from recording at least, the delegation will be, given a whole recap on that. Yeah.
Holston.org has a ton of information on there. We're also going to, on the rebrandpodcast.com, in the show notes, we're going to be posting some of the things. We've got a video where Bishop and the delegation spoke to our clergy immediately following General Conference, and you'll be able to watch that video. We've got some a debrief that we'll post up there. We've got a PowerPoint presentation that we can give. We'll get links to the social principles that will be there too if you've not had a chance to read through those. And again, if we're missing something, if you've got questions, reach out to us and let us know. So that's wrapped up this season.
Yeah.
We've talked a little bit about season 3, and we'll get more into that. But what about this annual conference
now and
thing?
then? Yeah, we'll both be doing daily recaps of annual conference, the times that we are there. But we will also be doing a first ever live studio recording, live audience recording of an episode for ReBrand. We have a really fantastic panel of guests that are going to come on and have a conversation with us about what it looks like for the church to be relevant to young people in today's society. So people complain, and rightly so, that our church struggles to do ministry to be relevant to young people in their communities. So we want to do something about that. So we've brought some of our favorite young people and some of our favorite church leaders who are going out of their way to do ministry with young people to come on and share some of their expertise, some of their struggles, some of their opinions on this pursuit of inclusivity, age inclusivity in our churches.
Yep. You can register for this on the rebrandpodcast.com. You should have hopefully you've received emails to allow you to register. Seats are limited just because due to the space, and they're filling up quickly. By the time you're hearing the podcast, the registration for the meal may have been closed because we have to put that order in soon. But be sure to check it out. And it may be standing room only by the time you hear this and make your way over. But that'll be okay. It'll be fun.
Absolutely. But until then,
really. You didn't even give me a chance to get ready for that.
That was it.
So be sure to check us out at Lake Junaluska at the live show, and be sure to check out the recaps, and then we will be moving into season 3, talking about the social media, getting more information from you all. But until then,
it's time to stop talking about what needs to change and start doing some of this change work.
Amen. We'll talk to you later. Bye.